Hey everyone, Richard here, and in this video I want to share with you the 8 habits that I developed in my 20s that enabled me to make my first million before the age of 30. So for those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Richard Norris. I've successfully built a multi-million pound property portfolio, and my group of property companies do around 100k a month. So with that being said, the reason why I wanted to share this video with you today is because I've been inspired by the works of people like Grant Cardone, Ed Milet, Sam Ovens, Dean Graziosi, Tony Robbins, all of these people who have done amazing things with their life. I've learned a lot from their work, and by learning a lot from their work, it's enabled me to be in the position that I am today. So as a result, I feel that it's only due that I pay back my own contribution and share insights that have enabled me to get to where I am in my life today. And hopefully that may help you too. So with that being said, let's jump in. So the first habit of the 8 habits that I developed that helped me to make my first million, the very first habit was all about long-term thinking. Now, I'm a millennial, so I was born in 1990. And so it's pretty hard actually to learn this trait, right? Because I was born in a world of instant gratification where, you can go on Amazon Prime right now and you can get whatever you want and it can be delivered the next day. And even in some cases, it can be delivered on the same day, right? So no longer do we have to wait or be patient for things. So I think it's made a lot of people, including myself, it made me very impatient. But one of the habits that I really learned and ended up trying to master and continue to master today to build my wealth is long-term thinking. And I'm an avid reader, so I study a lot. And one of the studies that I read was all about the marshmallow test from Stanford University. And in the test, they basically had 2 groups of children. It started with one child, and they tested one child, and then I think they ended up putting the study out to groups to test it more. And they basically gave the 2 children a choice. And they said that you could either have 1 marshmallow now or wait for a period of time and have 2 marshmallows. And one child took the marshmallow straight away based on instant gratification. And the other child waited a period of time and then ended up getting the preferred outcome or the more desirable outcome, which was 2 marshmallows. But they did have to sacrifice and use delayed gratification to wait a period of time before they got the 2 marshmallows. But what this study really showed is that the children that basically made their decisions on delayed gratification and basically waited to get 2 marshmallows actually performed a lot better in life and had a lot better lifetime outcomes in terms of financial success, in terms of like their own personal life, their marriage, etc., things like that, and even their academia. They basically done better in life than the child and the children that basically opted to take the 1 marshmallow, right? And this might seem like a straightforward thing to talk about based on the fact that I am a property investor, and there's all those sayings that you buy property and wait, right? And we all know that in order to build a multi-million pound property portfolio, and the way that you become wealthy, which is a difference to being rich, by the way that you become wealthy is that you buy assets that over the long term appreciate in value. And that's really where most of your wealth from property comes. Ultimately, you do get instant gratification on short-term thinking. You do get paid every month from cash flow. But ultimately, like I say, the way that you build real wealth into your life with property is that you need to think about long-term thinking and second-order consequences of the decisions that you make in the first instance. Because whatever decision that you make has a cause and an effect. And if you think about the effect in the long term, you'll always make a better decision in the short term, right? But when I first started building my property portfolio, I was in a job that I really didn't enjoy, but I was earning like a 6-figure salary. So I think in the early days when I was building my portfolio going back 7-8 years ago, when I bought sort of my, it was actually my second property investment, but I really started to understand how to build a property portfolio as an actual investor as opposed to just buying a property and kind of doing a bit of the guesswork, like I think we all do when we buy our first property, right? But when I started to invest properly and I'd had a bit of education, the very first few properties that I bought, I think were still processed on instant gratification. And the reason I say that is because when I didn't like my job at the time and I was so desperate to get out of the corporate life, so to speak, in the corporate world, I was really trying to replace my income as quickly as I could. And I think that based on that variable that I needed to get sort of £5,000 a month to leave my job, And then I thought that, hey, if I get £5,000 a month from property, I'll never have to work again. I think that that was so appealing to me, and I wanted to do it so quickly to move away from pain and towards pleasure, that I basically ended up making bad decisions. And actually, one of those properties right now sits in my portfolio 7, 8 years in, and I'm actually selling at the moment because it wasn't performing very well. It actually became a liability. And all of the decisions that I've made that have gone well in my portfolio have all been based on long-term thinking, right? And that really helped me to build my net worth and get to the position I am today based on that one variable, changing my short-term thinking to long-term thinking. But I think that a lot of people in the first instance, when they build a property portfolio, and again, I'm only speaking from personal experience here, that I think that sometimes with like the new property strategies that are being kind of marketed across the education sector in property, talk about no money down. They talk about purchase lease options, rent to rent, how you can basically start a property business with no money, become financially independent. Some of them are even saying as fast as 6 to 10 weeks, right? And I think that that ultimately leads to bad decisions, because whilst like controlling property, which is the no money down options, you don't actually build long-term wealth. You might build short-term cash flow, but it's not sustainable because you don't own the assets, and therefore you don't get the long-term appreciation of the assets and the compounding effect of the assets going up in value over time. And because I kind of went on these training courses back then as well, 7, 8 years ago, I was already kind of in that mindset from the marketing that, hey, I can quit my job in 12 months and therefore I'm going to go and build this property portfolio really fast, quit my job and become financially independent. And as it so happens, I did manage to get the gross rental income up of my portfolio above £10,000 a month within 12 months. But it wasn't using no money down strategies or instant gratification. I made some of my decisions, poor decisions back then, on instant gratifications, which is why those assets didn't perform as well as they could have with my kind of new mindset of long-term thinking. But the long-term thinking definitely attributed to my wealth when I basically realized that in my 20s after the first couple of years and started making better decisions. So I think that's the key. Like I speak to a lot of clients that I have and new people that want to onboard into my training programs. And when I'm on the course, like the very first thing I hear, sometimes they have unrealistic expectations with the cash reserves that they have, and they want to build the portfolio as quickly as possible and maybe get to 5,000, 10,000 net income after all expenses paid, that is, within the first 12 months. And whilst like I don't want to say that something's unrealistic, I think that you can achieve that, but when you achieve that, you don't really in that quick of time. Most of the time your decisions are based on the instant gratification, the short-term cash flow, and they're not thinking about the whole business as a whole, and they're not thinking about the longer term. So you miss out on long-term growth, which ultimately is what will make you wealthier in the long run. So that's my first kind of variable for you, or habit, if you like. That's my first habit, is basing my decisions on long-term thinking. And I was listening to an interview the other day between Alex Hormozi and Grant Cardone, again, both two individuals that aspire me and have done amazing things. And I'm so grateful that they share their work. And on the interview, Grant was basically saying to Alex that one thing that he observed and noticed is that people that get rich sell real estate. They sell their properties, they sell their assets. But people that build wealth, real wealth, and there's a big difference between people that are wealthy and people that are rich, but those people that build that wealth, they don't ever sell, they hold their assets. And that kind of, I just wanted to share that with you because that kind of struck a chord with me and came back to the mantra and the habit of long-term thinking. Now, habit number two. Habit number two is all about resilience and equanimity. Now, I didn't learn about equanimity until recently when I read the book, or I was doing it, but at the time I wasn't realizing it was called this. And Ed Milet's book, The Power of One More, introduced me to what equanimity was and is. And equanimity basically means staying calm and having unwavering faith and staying in balance when your emotions want to go out of balance, when things are going wrong, right? And to stay in that state of equanimity, which is really, really difficult as a business owner, especially if you're kind of wanting to build a multi-million-pound property portfolio or build a multi-million-pound business. You are going to be faced with lots of highs and lows, right? In life, nothing is ever smooth. Nothing is ever simple. And it's never, ever just a linear flat line. You're always going to get these peaks and troughs. And I've realized that on my journey, and that's where you need to build the resilience, because you need to build the resilience in your character when you're at the lowest to then get back up to those troughs. Because one thing I've learned and that I've observed through my own life and building my own success today, and continuing to develop and wanting to grow and expand a lot more. My visions and aspirations for life are huge, which is one of my future habit points for you. If you stick around in this video, I'll talk about thinking big in a second. But if we stay back to the point of resilience and equanimity, like if you want to build that sort of level of wealth in your life, then you do need to be extremely resilient. And I've had lots of things go wrong in my life. I've had lots of great things happen in my life. And I think everybody will experience that at whatever stage of life you're at. You're going to have, honestly, periods of extreme highs and extreme lows, because that's how life works. Like it needs to bring your life back to equilibrium. So for every peak, there's always a downside, right? So you need to be resilient. And in order to like be resilient and have unwavering faith that things are going to work out, you basically need to stay calm under pressure. And I wasn't the best at this. I definitely wasn't the best at this, and I'm still not the best at it now. But I realized that actually just by being resilient in that moment and just keep going when things were tough, like there were times where honestly, like when I quit my job probably a little prematurely, and I took a voluntary redundancy package when I was building the portfolio, where I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I've just gone from £100,000 stable income to now an unpredictable £5,000 a month net. And that was like within 6-7 months. And I have like 3 children at home. I have my partner, and like we're reliant on that income. Like at that point, I was like, have I made the right decision? And you have to just be resilient, right? And when you're doing your refurbishments at the start, things were going over cost, over budget. I was underprepared. And it's the resilience of like just keeping the unwavering faith that got me through those times and has enabled me to come out and to make that first million before the age of 30. That really was one of the key points and the key habits. And again, as I strive to achieve even more in my life and greater levels of success, like going from like 0 to 1 million was tough, but then going from like 1 million to 10 million, like the next stage that I'm in at the moment, I'm probably like a third to halfway there right now, like of that goal. Like I realize things get tougher and I'm having to be even more resilient, right? So that's my second habit. The third habit that I want to share with you is discipline. Is like having that self-discipline and making sacrifices and being consistent. And I learned this from Sam Ovens. Like he said, how you show up to one thing is how you show up to everything. I learned that in one of the training programs that I brought off Sam. And when I learned that and what he was talking about, I started to adopt that into my own life. And I started to show up daily a lot more consistently. Don't get me wrong, things are never perfect, but it's not about the how you show up when things are going great. It's easy to show up when things are going great, but when things aren't going great, like that's when you have to show up even better. Like I think sometimes people think that, and like I thought this as well, that people who are above me or people that I want to be like, or people who I aspire to be, or maybe you want to get to your first million. I think you think that sometimes we all think, that that this person or those people are always motivated. So like you might be thinking, well, in order for Rich to get to his first million, he was just motivated all the time. And that's not true. Like that's a misconception that I had as well. And actually there's days where I'm like really unmotivated and I have to push myself and I'm coming up against adversity. And it's those days and how I show up when I'm unmotivated and make the sacrifices to do the things I need to get done on that day, even though I don't feel like it and there might be a more attractive proposition or proposal on the day. When I choose to do the hard thing and take the path of most resistance, and I build that discipline in, that's when I make those breakthroughs. And that's when I've made those breakthroughs as well and had those exponential gains. And they've come later on. Again, when you put in the work at that moment and you're making that self-discipline and that sacrifice to do the work, you don't see the tangible result right away. Again, when we revert back to the first habit of long-term thinking, the long-term effect of that decision and having that discipline is we see the tangible result later on and it manifests itself into substantial amounts of money. And the other thing is like, I mean, when I was in my 20s growing up, like I was trying to find myself. And I think a lot of people, and still now, I'm still at some points trying to find myself and where my life is going and building more self-awareness and mental cognition into my life. But if you're anything like me, when I was in my 20s, like I did things just because I wanted to fit in. So let me give you an example. So in my 20s, like I had lots of friends and we'd go out partying at the weekends, we'd go night clubbing, we'd go on like lads holidays and we'd be drinking and all these sorts of things. And it wasn't necessarily me. I'm quite introverted. Like I just took the Myers-Briggs test. And for those of you who may have done my training programs before, like I'm a big fan of Myers-Briggs. And like I took the test and I'm pretty equal actually. I'm like 51% introverted, 49% extroverted. And I'd definitely say that that's quite right. I'm quite balanced in the area, but if I had to pick one, I'd be more introverted. So when I was going out partying and not having the discipline, and I was drinking at the weekends, I was trying to fit in and be somebody that I actually wasn't. But I would always go out drinking, do it anyway. Didn't have the discipline and the strength of character to say no. So I'd go out drinking, I'd go out partying. And at the time, sometimes I'd get into it and it'd be good and I'd have a great night. But the next day, I'd always be regretting it. Have a hangover, bank balance has gone down. I'd be thinking, Rich, why did you do that? So having those, but coming out of that and developing those character traits to say, hey, you know what? I'm not this person. Building the discipline into my character enabled me to stop doing those things, recognize that those things weren't serving me and weren't going to contribute to where I wanted to be. And so I stopped doing those things, built in the self-discipline and started focusing on the main things in my life and where I wanted to be. And ultimately, I ended up building a closer network of people that aligned more with my own values and had similar levels, if not better levels of discipline that I did. And that level of discipline, I think, was a big contributor to how I was able to make my first million before 30 and being consistent. The next one is like number 4. So number 4 is about investing in myself. So I constantly invest in myself, and I invested in myself and education and self-development programs, like all in my 20s. And I had a ratio where I'd kind of live off 30% of my income, and the 70% of my income would be invested into training programs, self-development programs. Hence why I enrolled on Sam Ovens programs. I did some of my own property education back then. And I have invested in Grant Cardone's training programs. And I recently invested in another one of Grant Cardone's training programs. This is Cardone U Business Package. Some of you watching this video may know what it is. And I pay $2,000 a month on a 36-month contract. So it worked out to about, the total investment was around £71,000 over 3 years. And I invested in that program for contributors to myself to help me go to the next level, but also for my own sales team and my employees within my business, so that they could develop too, and that the business could grow and expand to the next level. So I'm always investing in myself, and I believe that investing in myself and learning new things from people who are where I want to be has enabled me to do it faster, quicker, making less costly mistakes, and has enabled me to ultimately have that self-belief and that self-confidence that you need, which kind of bonds with the unwavering faith that I talked about, which has enabled me to take huge high levels of action and to really hit those goals. And that was ultimately contributed in me hitting my first million as well before the age of 30. And actually, the more that I kind of grow, the more my companies become more profitable, the more money I'm actually reinvesting into myself and education. And it just has a compounding effect, because like one comparable that I make is like, I think a lot of the times people get caught up and they don't see the main thing and they lose perspective about the decisions that they're making in their life. So let me give you an example. I mean, back when I was like, say 23, for example, when I'd still invest in myself, like I would always make the decision that, hey, if I invest 5K here, I can spend 5K on a holiday. That becomes equilibrium, right? But I think sometimes people get the balance wrong and they invest 5K in a holiday and they don't invest anything in themselves, and they think that 5K is expensive investment. But actually, when you put 5K into yourself, like that makes you compounding interest and it pays you dividends and profits for the rest of your life. Whereas if you put 5K into a holiday based on instant gratification, feels great at the time, you may have a wonderful time, but you come back, you end up getting holiday blues, you end up feeling low, and then you end up having to do more work because you took the holiday in the first place, and you go back to your corporate job and you don't like it as much. You hate it more than when you left, right? So we justify decisions to ourselves based on emotional instant gratification, as opposed to investing in ourselves based on long-term gratification. and that process of delayed gratification, which I talked about in habit number 1. So investing in myself first has been a contributor to me hitting those goals as well. And then the next habit, the 5th habit, all about raising my standards. So again, a meme that I kind of learned from Sam Ovens was, you don't become your biggest dreams, you become the lowest standards that you're willing to accept. And when I heard that and had it explained to me from Sam, and I learned this process, I realized that actually, yeah, hey, I need to raise my standards, because if I set my standards too low and I'm happy with that, I'm never going to reach the goals that I want, right? Because ultimately we don't become the biggest dreams. Like, we move more away from pain towards, we do more to move away from pain than we do to move towards pleasure, right? So often it takes for something really bad to happen in our lives to actually then take action, right? So in order to raise your standards, right? You raise your standards and then you are able to achieve those goals quicker, faster, and you're able to actually break through ceilings that you don't think you're capable of, right? But when you set those standards as irrefutable standards that you live by on a daily basis, almost as if it's a hygiene standard, then you start to achieve bigger goals. Because like for me now, £500,000 of cash reserves across my business is my hygiene standard. Like, my hygiene standard is this: hey, the cash balance is 0 at £500,000. I want £500,000 of cash reserves in the business at all times, and that's my standard. That standard will grow as I get bigger. And ultimately, the reason that my standard is just £500,000 of cash reserves right now means that actually, if I want to get to 1 million, 2 million, 10 million, 10 million of cash reserves in the bank, then I need to raise my standards to that again. And again, I'm just using it as an analogy, because ultimately you wouldn't really want £10 million stuck in the bank, right? That needs to be invested to grow wealth. Of course, I'm a property investor. I'm going to be investing it. But my point is that let's take that to earnings. Let's say that you're happy, you're comfortable earning £5,000 a month. If you're comfortable earning £5,000 a month, then you'll never achieve past that, because that becomes your hygiene standard, right? And ultimately, if you're not happy in your life, like, you need to look at where you're at right now. Where you're at right now, if you're earning $1,500 a month, you're just breaking even, or you feel like you're broke, or you're just making $2,000 a month. Ultimately, the only reason that you're making that money is purely because that's the standards that you're accepting. The moment that you choose to say, hey, I am no longer accepting these standards in my life, £10,000 a month is my new hygiene standard. Like, I will do everything possible to earn £10,000 of net income a month. That is now my standard. It's no longer a dream. It's a standard in my life that I live by. Like hygiene, like you brush your teeth every day. When it becomes that sort of habit, then you start to grow your wealth, and you move towards financial success. So you need to raise your standards. And for me, when I raised my standards, like, that's what enabled me to grow and continue to grow. And I keep raising my standards. And times when I get comfortable, I'm like, Rich, you need to raise your standards again. So that's really helped me, and hopefully that insight will help you too. The next one is habit number 6. Now, I call this like money mindset, and I'm going to create a completely separate video on money mindset, because there's so many things around money that differentiate us and enable people to be where they want to be, or keep people trapped, the way that they think about money. So for me, the biggest thing I learned about money, like really early on in my life, is that you actually can have it all. And like, rich people think both, poor people think one. And I love my parents so much, but like, one of the habits that they had in their life, and still have now to some extent, is that they can be like quite frugal. Like, they come from a place of scarcity. They're always holding on to things. And that's kind of been programmed into me from a young age. And therefore I was always like that. Don't ever stretch beyond your means, right? And at times there was the love language at that time of, hey, we can't afford it right now. Money doesn't grow on trees. And actually, like, there was always this thing that money's bad. Like, oh yeah, they may have money, but they might not be happy. Like, rich people aren't happy, or they've got all that money, but they don't have my health. And that's kind of like a really bad way to look at things. But I was that person back in my young 20s. I was that person. And then sort of around 23, 24, started really the self-development process, started to learn, started to grow, and realized that, hey, that's not going to serve me. That's not coming from a place of abundance. And actually, I can have my health and money. And actually, money is good, because ultimately helps me to be healthier, right? Because I can eat better food, I can get fresh organic food, for example. I don't need to go into the freezer section and buy cheap meals that maybe don't have the best ingredients in, and it's going to make me not as healthy and all those sorts of things, right? Because also, like, I just had an experience, and I'll share this experience with you, and I don't want to make this too long-winded, but I'll share this experience with you because this one thing around money changed everything for me. I last year I slipped 2 discs in my spine. I did it in the gym deadlifting. I slipped 2 discs in my spine, and I was in like agony. I couldn't work for like 4 to 5 months. And for the first time in my life, I realized, hey, this passive income that I have coming from my property portfolio has saved you. It's the very reason. This is the actual very reason why I did it in the first place, to give you contingency. And I was so grateful that I had the portfolio and a business that was leveraged with the team, because it meant that operations didn't stop. Things could keep going. But in that position, if I didn't have the business, if I didn't have the property portfolio and that money coming in, and I was back in the corporate job, and I was traveling like all of the time in my corporate job in the car, because I was a business development manager selling patient-specific technology in medical devices for scoliosis and stuff, ironically for spine treatment. And I wouldn't have been able to drive. I wouldn't have been able to sit in a car for that long, because it was just agony. So I wouldn't have been able to earn any income. So I realized actually having money at that point was good, because I had bad health at that time. That event may have happened if I had money or didn't have money anyway. So it's kind of one of those external influences that was going to happen whether I had money or didn't have money. It didn't matter about my financial position. It didn't affect the outcome of the deadlift, right? But I actually had money, and I was able to get through that. I was able to get private healthcare. I was able to get stem cells put into my back from like platelets and stuff. And I'm thinking about going to Panama to have some new stem cells, which cost like $23,000, but I'm in a position where I can afford that. And I'm not telling you these things to be arrogant at all. It's like, it's just the reality of the situation, right? And therefore I realized that actually you need your health and you need money. So think both. So if you think about money and you come from a place of abundance as opposed to scarcity, and you don't make that binary decision, the moment that you think that money is the root of all evil, or actually I can't have it all and I have to make a decision between my health and money, or rich people are unhappy and basically because I'm not rich, I'm happier, that's going to keep you trapped. And that was the transition that I made, and making that mindset shift enabled me to get to where I am. And like I say, I'm going to create a whole separate video on money mindset, and I'm going to share some insights that I've learned from other people as well that have helped me to grow my life. And the whole money mindset thing might be like a 20-30 minute video in itself, because there's so much around how you think about money that actually determines the goals that you achieve and where you get to in life. And then habit number 7. So I learned this from one of my favorite people, Grant Cardone. He's an absolute inspiration in my life. And you'll find on my channel, I share things that I learned from him a lot. He's done incredible things. And I think the information that he shares is extremely valuable. And so I'm so grateful for him. But one of the things I learned recently from Grant, and has been like really programmed into me as I've been going through his Cardone University business package, is that I need to think bigger. Like, thinking bigger is the goal to everything. And I kind of learned this from Grant like a few years ago. So in like my mid-20s, I learned about thinking bigger, but it really came to its fruition like very recently that I still wasn't thinking big enough. Because for me at the time in my mid-20s, like thinking bigger was like, okay, I'm in my mid-20s. Can I make 2 million? Can I make 2 million before 30, right? And ultimately I did achieve that goal. But that ultimately thinking past the million mark, thinking about the 2 million mark, enabled me to achieve above £1 million, right? Which ultimately for most people might be like a good metric or their first target, right? I made mine 2 million in order to hit the million, and then I surpassed the million and managed to hit the 2, and I actually surpassed the 2. I ended up at around 2.5 million, right? Not including the net worth from my portfolio as well. So in terms of that, thinking bigger has enabled me to hit those goals. And now like thinking bigger is like, okay, like let's think about the £1 billion mark, right? And it might sound stupid, right? Like I'm maybe at like 5-6 million, I don't know, something like that across my life of assets and net worth and cash reserves and capital in banks and stuff. But ultimately, like if I'm like there, and I think like most people think, well, why don't you just aim for 10 million, right? But you need to think bigger. So now I'm thinking about 1 billion, because ultimately you do the same things every day. You do the same things, the same processes to hit 10 million as you would a billion, right? So why not think about a billion, like Grant says? So I'm starting to think about the super yachts potentially. That might be a target for me, right? Maybe you don't want a yacht, okay? But it doesn't matter, materialistic things, or whether it's something that you want to do in life, or for me, like setting up a philanthropic fund. And doing amazing things for people that are going through like hard times. Like when I had my spine injury, like honestly, like it was really painful, and like it gave me a lot of perspective, and I was able to become like emotionally a better human being for sure. And I still struggle a bit with it now, but it enabled me to give perspective and clarity, and it enabled me to add value into why I was doing what I'm doing, and the purpose that I'm trying to create. So part of that process to get to a billion would be like, well, if I was a billionaire, how many people could I actually help that need help? If I could set up this philanthropic fund as well and do great things in the world, what could I do with that? And ultimately, I could do way more with a billion than I could with just 10 billion or a million, right? So thinking bigger enables you to hit your goals quicker as well. Because when you think bigger, you activate your RAS, which is your reticular activating system, which again, Ed Milet talks about in The Power of One More in his book. And basically, it's like, okay, what you focus on expands. So if you think about £1 billion and you focus on a billion, you start to manifest and think about the how, and you start to take action. And you might not get to 1 billion or 100 million or 10 million, wherever you are. But if you get close, let's say you aim for 1 billion and you get 100 million, you've still done great. Let's say you aim for 10 million and you become a net 5 million, you've still done well as well. Whatever the individual goal is for you. But for me, it was like the moment that I started to think bigger, the moment that I started to attract bigger things into my life. I actually started to attract clients with like 104 properties that wanted to work with me, people that had sold massive law firms for 8 figures. Because I started to think bigger, I started to attract that into my life, people that thought that big too, and it helped. And that's that whole thing about the RAS, the reticular activating system. And like, if you don't know what the reticular activating system is, it's just basically what you focus on expands. And when like the best example I can use is, let's say you want your dream car, you put on your vision board that you want a Bentley or you want a Ferrari, right? All you'll see around you is the Bentleys and the Ferraris. But when you're not focused on that, they're still there, but they're not in your peripheral vision, right? That you just don't see them. But when you focus on them, your reticular activated system starts to see them, because what you focus on expands. And then the last one to move on and wrap this up is habit number 8, which is about focus, like being laser focused and keeping the main thing the main thing. I think we live in a world of noise and distraction. Like, again, especially for me in my personal situation, growing up as a millennial, being born in 1990, like, we've just had social media, we've had phones, and we've got a lot of distractions, right? And it's actually chaos. And like, in order to get stuff done, I turn my phone off onto airplane mode most days to get the work done that I need to get done. So I'm focusing on the main thing and keeping the main thing to move myself away from distractions. And then I also think, like, one of the things that I did early on when I was trying to find myself and what I wanted to do, I'd start something and then I'd think, hang on, that person's earning more than me, is way further than I am. Maybe that's a better thing to do. And maybe I should go and learn to become a marketer and run my own agency. Or maybe I should set up my own sales training program, right? But I realized that actually that was the wrong thing to do, and that I actually should just focus in on my skill set. And my skill set at the time was property, because I'd done property since 15 years old. If you know my story, you'll understand I worked for letting agents at 15 on the weekends and stuff. And my mum works for a very, very successful property investor over in Oxford, their family's been doing property for 50, 60 years and building intergenerational wealth. And I was lucky enough to be in a situation at 15 where I could have those opportunities to learn really young. But I took advantage of those situations. And rather than moving and digressing, I realized, hey, Rich, keep the main thing the main thing. You know property, you've been learning property since 15, you've been doing property since 15. Like, keep the main thing the main thing. And when I did that, everything got better, and I started to create that momentum, and I started to create that wealth. So hopefully that helps you give some insights into how to build habits into your life. And hopefully this will help you make your first million too, like it did for me. And just to say that these habits as well aren't habits that you just forget about. Like none of these habits that I've suggested and talked about here, these 8 habits, they've helped me to get to where I am today. But in order to get to where I want to be and hit the next goals and the next goals, I need to continually grow and develop and build these character traits in even more into my character and make them more a habitual experience in order to strengthen them and get to that next level. So these are things that you should always keep working on. So yeah, like I say, I hope you found it useful. If you found value in this video, hit the like button. It will really help me. It helps the YouTube algorithm and helps me to get more people watching my content and sharing my work. So I'd be extremely grateful if you could hit that like button. If you haven't already, smash the subscribe button and click the bell icon so you can get notifications. I do multiple videos a week like this on content all around property investing, business, finance, and I'm even going to start to do some sales stuff as well. So if any of those things relate to you and you want to be building a multi-million pound property portfolio and you want to learn how to do that, check out the videos on my channel. Equally, if you want to learn about habits like I've shared with you today, that have philosophies, life skills, stuff that have helped me to go to where I am, things that I'm learning, then go over to that section in the channel. And equally, if there's anything to do with finance and sales, you can also check that part out on my channel too. If it's not there, it hasn't been filmed yet. If it's there, then great. At the time I'll put this video up, I'm not sure whether it'll be there or not, but if it's there, go check out the sales channel. If it's not, you can check out that too. So like I say, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.